I explore the state of Indiana. My name is Jenna Bosiger, and thank you for watching, liking, and subscribing to my Cryptic Cryptids YouTube channel. I had never heard anything about the state of Indiana. But if you look at where it's positioned, it's sandwiched in between Illinois and Ohio. Indiana has kind of flown under the radar. And come to find out, giant stories are coming out of the state of Indiana. Very descriptive stories coming from the scientists of those days who were excavating mounds. If you look up close at the state of Indiana, it's been farmed, cultivated, and when all this was first being dug up, people were finding things. So I made a map of the location of giant skeletons having been reported back in the olden days in Indiana. Another 9-foot, half-foot giant Nephilim discovered in Indiana. Robinson, who told of seeing the huge skeleton tombed, added that, according to the men of science who were there, were the remains of a white race that had inhabited that part of the country before the advent of the red man, from the mound out of which the large male skeleton was taken about a year ago. It is claimed that one of these skeletons exhibits a remarkably fine specimen of Caucasian skull and the other one of Mongolian and Caucasian varieties mixed. 2 pieces of jewelry were also found. One of them a 6-pointed star, 1 inch from tip to tip. Each of the 6 points has 13 small stars, so small that almost to require a microscope to discern them, while in the center of a piece is a full moon, not discernible without a glass. The other relic is a copper cross of peculiar shape, covered with figures of birds and beasts. The society has been offered liberal prices for the relics, but will not sell. James R. Duffin, president of the association, will exhibit these skulls, if they can be preserved, and the relics at the World's Fair. There was a 9-foot giant uncovered in Noble County. Huge skeleton unearthed. Indiana produces bones of man believed to have been mound builder. Indianapolis, Indiana. The complete skeleton of one of Indiana's oldest inhabitants, said by Dr. W. N. Logan, state geologist, to be that of a mound builder, has been placed in the State Museum. The skeleton, more than 6 feet in height, was found by T.C. Heistent of Bloomington and Dick Gunnersey of Bedford, in excavating a prehistoric mound near the East Fork of White River in Lawrence County. Dr. Logan says that the time when the mound builders inhabited Indiana cannot be determined as to years, but it was a long period before the first record of the Indians is certain. The mound from which the body was taken was in the form of a square with a vault system constructed of slabs of limestone. The skeleton was lying as buried, with all parts intact and in position with the exception of some of the more fragile parts. Large skeleton found in Indiana. Whitestown, Indiana. A large skeleton of a human being was unearthed while men were at work in a gravel pit north of here. A slight cave-in revealed the skeleton, and it was removed in almost perfect condition. It is thought the skeleton of an Indian of unusual size. The bones of a small animal, supposed to be a dog, were found near the large skeleton. Found skeletons 8 feet tall. While excavating in a gravel pit in Anderson, Indiana, workmen unearthed 6 skeletons, most of which were 8 feet tall and over. One in particular was that of a man of giant stature. All were far above the height of tall persons. 2 of the skeletons were those of women. In the graves were found pieces of pottery, such as were unknown by the Indians, which leads to the conclusion that the bones are of those people of a prehistoric race. 2 bodies were found close to an ancient mound. This is another one from Anderson, or the same one. It says, Great skeleton found, Anderson, Indiana. John Beale, a farmer living in the north part of this county, found some giant human skeletons while digging a hole in his field Friday. There were half a dozen skulls of gigantic size. The skeletons were those of men who in their lifetime must have been at least, I can't read the number, something feet tall. Cass County, Indiana. Railroad workers uncover an 8-foot giant Nephilim. Cave found in Indiana hints age-old race. Giant skeletons and metals strange to America seen in ancient sepulchre, which is a stone tomb. Giant's Grave, Connorsville, Indiana. 9 feet tall was this man whose skeleton was found in Indiana, Connorsville, Indiana, while Sexton Charles Reinman was digging a grave in the city cemetery. He came upon the skeleton of a monster man. It had been buried in a sitting posture with the feet to the east and was only about 3 feet below the surface. The remains indicated that the being of which this was once a part was a veritable giant, probably 9 feet in height. The femur bone is about a yard long, and the massive underjaw is much larger than that of an ordinary man. It is supposed that these bones are those of an Indian or mound builder. Bones of a giant found. Well-developed mammoth skeletons in an Indiana mound. Crawfordsville, Indiana. In a gravel pit along the high bluffs of Sugar Creek, 25 giant skeletons here have been exhumed, and the unburying of these mammoth bones is still going on. The last skeleton taken out measured. The femur and the pelvic bones are twice as large as those of an ordinary man. The grinning skull contained a perfect set of teeth as beautiful as polished marble. The bones were perfect in every detail. Of the whole number of skeletons thus far found, only 2, the remainder representing the work of a race of men evidently extinct for centuries. This is certainly the best discovery of skeletons in which the character development of giants has been observed. Ceremonial earthwork in Dearborn County, Indiana. Delaware County, Indiana giants. Delaware County, ancient land of the giants. I'm thinking that in South America they call them elongated skulls, and in North America they call them flatheads. So I was looking a little bit into the flatheads, and there's definitely more research to be done on that. I did find this, Skull Given Museum. Archaeologist presents Indian relic to Smithsonian, bones of Flathead Chief. Captain Crittenden of Santa Barbara, California. Ancient Nordic skulls uncovered at Indiana Henge site. Mound giants in Indiana said to antedate Indian. South Bend, Indiana. 8 skeletons, one of them clad in copper armor, and a hoard of rare weapons and bits of personal adornments have been found in a mysterious mound on the farm of Grove Vosburg near Walkerton. Vosburg, a 70-year-old farmer, had long desired to know the secret of the mound, which, according to local tradition, dates back hundreds of years. Secretly excavating the pile of earth, he came upon the strange burial place. Giant skeletons. 8 skeletons lay in a circular formation arranged like the spokes of a wheel, with the skulls together. Copper breastplates, bands, and other bits of armor adorned the skeleton of one man who apparently had been of giant stature. Embedded in the skull was beautifully chipped flint arrowhead. The soft earth of the mound revealed other treasures. 3 pounds of ore believed to be either silver or white gold lie with the bones. There were corroded copper bands, which antiquarians here believe were used to bind war clubs, 2 pipe bowls, one of smooth black stone and the other carved with the replica of a fantastic monster were found. Oh, I want to see it. The belief that the bones are not those of Indians but belong to the ancient and little-known race of mound builders has arisen because of the great size of the bones and the fact that the skull formations are not those of Indian types. The skulls seem to have little forehead and the eye cavities are high in the head. Shown on the right is the newspaper article from the Evening News in San Jose, California, dated October 1925, reporting the discovery from South Bend, Indiana. And here is a very interesting article. I've been collecting every time I come across anything about horned creatures, and I put this in the list. Horned man's skeleton. Hans Augustus and James Hannon and Leo Ellsworth returned Monday from White River, where they have been the past 6 weeks hauling wood for the Indian Agency. They report finding a skeleton of a horned man. The skeleton was found near the East Fork of the White River, close to a large cave. It was fully developed man and was on exhibition at the White River for several days before being sent to a museum in Washington City, Snowflake Herald. Giant bones unearthed, horns on the skull of a skeleton found in Indiana. Knightstown, Indiana, bones of a primitive giant have been unearthed by Alonzo Lewis, a farmer living near Sulphur Springs. The skeleton more than 7 feet in length, and the skull has horns about 1.5 inches long, projecting upward from a point just behind the ears. Several similar skeletons have been found here in the past few weeks. All the peculiar bones were found in a gravel pit on the Lewis farm. Remains of the largest work of those mound builders in that county were to be seen in the bluffs 75 to 100 feet above Sand Creek in the Sand Creek Township. It is a stone mound 71 feet in diameter, showing at this time a height of 2 to 3 feet high above the surrounding surface. Exterior walls appear to be made of stones placed on edge, but the central portion did not show any regular arrangement of the stones. The first discovery of the skeletal remains in that mound was made in 1865 when a farmer getting stone for a spring house dug into a sort of tomb, which he found a small skeleton of a child in. There were several large trees growing on top of the mound, just to prove its age, oak trees. And when he discovered the skeleton of the child, it caused curiosity, and he decided to dig further, and he found more skeletons. They were bound in bands of cedar wrapped around their chests, while others were charred, perhaps in observance of a religious rite. Weapons found with the skeletons were unlike those used by the Indians. No intelligent investigation was ever conducted until 1879, 14 years after the discovery. The state geologist brought a couple of men out here, one from Cincinnati and one from New York. They found a skeleton that measured 9 feet 8 inches tall. There was a sort of necklace of mica lying around the neck and across the breasts, and at the feet stood an image made of burned clay with pieces of flint rock embedded in it. Robinson kept the image and some of the bones. As late as 1937, bones of a giant were in a basket in the office of Keller Mill along Sand Creek, about a mile below the mound site. Kenneth Keller, grandson of Robinson, remembers that basket of bones. He said the bones were lost in 1937 when a flood washed out the office. Robinson, who was told of seeing the huge skeleton exhumed, added that, according to the men of science who were there, they were the remains of a white race that had inhabited that part of the country before the advent of the red man. The giant-like race had worked hard to entomb its dead. The rocks in the mound had been placed end to end with no attempt to plaster or seal them together. A lot of these mounds were destroyed by the locals, and you don't get any rewards for turning in artifacts, so the only ones left, the Indianapolis News says, The way they are digging up 7-8 foot skeletons in various parts of the state leads us no doubt whether we are really the greatest people that ever lived in Indiana at all. That's about the only skeletons that can be found in Indiana. The medical colleges got the rest. Jeffersonville, Indiana giant. Artisans and artifacts of vanished races. Peculiar gravel mound in Henry County, Indiana. This isolated monument of nature at an early period, surrounded by water, 2 roadways from north and south leading to it, made by human agency. Human skeleton 8 feet in height, unearthed 12 feet beneath the surface, 84 ivory beads found in ivory saucer on the breast of giant. A few miles north of Kennard in Henry County, Indiana, is a remarkable mound that covers an area of 5 acres. Unlike other mounds found in Indiana and other states, it is composed primarily of sand and gravel and covered by a forest of native trees of centuries' growth. There is not another deposit or sand or gravel in 6 or 8 miles. The surrounding country is a plain. This pile of sand and gravel, as stated in above, covers an area of 5 acres and is of a cone shape. When first known by white men, it had well-defined ditch around it, and 2 made roadways wide enough for a wagon, one from the north and one from the other from the south. Farmers and road builders that needed gravel and sand found these glacial screenings to come handy in the building of public highways, and for a small price per cubic yard paid to the owner of land found it more convenient than going to Springport or Mount Summit, a distance of 8 miles. After opening this deposit to a depth of 12 feet from the top of the mound, they unearthed a human skeleton whose framework measured nearly 8 feet high. His skull would fit over the head of a large man, his jaws being massive and teeth in perfect state of preservation. On the breast of this big chief was a saucer-shaped vessel of ivory, about 6 inches in diameter, containing 84 ivory beads that must have been made from the tusks of mastodons. That's quite a tale. A primitive man. His skeleton unearthed by Indiana farmer. Muncie, Indiana, unearthed a skeleton which remained in a state of primitive man. This is the third peculiar skeleton unearthed by Lewis from the same gravel pit. Giant skeletons unearthed. Prehistoric graveyard discovered on Indiana farm. LaGrange, Indiana. A prehistoric graveyard has been unearthed on the farm of Solomon Hendrick. A large number of skeletons have been found, all more than 8 feet high. The find was made in a mound 30 feet high. When 12 feet of the mound had been removed, the skeletons were exposed. The jaws and the teeth were well preserved. Trinkets, ivory beads, and a shield made of bone were in the graves. Mound near Petersburg has interesting history. Giant's Cave in Mound State Park. Mound builder's bones. Skeleton of giant unearthed in Indiana by workmen. New Carlisle, Indiana. Relics of a prehistoric age are being brought to light in Noble County. The find is in York Township, where workmen excavating for a public highway found the skeleton of an inhabitant of early days. The bones indicate the person was fully 9 feet tall. The bones are unusually large, and the size proportion of the skeleton was found, indicating that the body had been interred in a sitting position. The belief is advanced that the remains of those of a mound builder. Other discoveries in the same neighborhood indicate that the York Township was inhabited years before the Redmen set foot on Hoosier soil. Noble County is believed to have the burial place of a large number of mound builders. Pike County, Indiana, Giant's Tomb, and this is a different one. This giant skeleton. Discovery on a farm in Indiana of the bones of a man of gigantic statue. Shelbyville, Indiana. George Arnold, a farmhand in the employ of Franklin Boots, who lives 15 miles west of the city, made a discovery which has excited widespread interest in the skeleton of what was once a man of gigantic proportions, which was uncovered in a gravel pit on Mr. Boots' farm. The skeleton was found in a sitting posture facing the east and about 6 feet beneath the surface. Some of the bones were badly broken, a caving of a bank, but the skull and some of the larger bones were taken out intact, and from them may be easily realized the gigantic statue of the being to whom they once gave support. A measurement of the skull from front to rear, the rule passing through the eye socket to the back of the head, shows it to have been about 16 inches, while the breadth of the inferior maxillary was about 8½ inch, showing that the brain must have weighed from 4½ to 5 pounds. Careful measurements of the bones established the fact that the man, when alive, was not less than 9 feet high and large in proportion. From the appearance of the teeth, which are very large and do not show the slightest sign of decay, to the bones of the jaw, the man could not have been less than 100 years old when he died, and of course may have been much older. The bones of the lower jaw extent of the muscular development in that organ for which is far beyond anything of the present day. How long ago the body of this giant was interred, and where it was unearthed, or to what tribe the nation he belonged when he trod the earth in all the majesty of his strength, it is impossible to say, but it must have been ages ago, as all the indications show that the soil where the remains were discovered has not been disturbed for many generations. Steps have been taken to have casts made of the bones, and they will be placed either in the state collection or some of our college museums. There is Indiana's Sun Temple ley line state park. This one, just all I can read is Mound giants in Indiana said to antedate Indian. Giant skeleton unearthed in Valparaiso, Indiana. While the steam shovels of the Knickerbocker Sand Company were loading sand at Dune Park on the shore of Lake Michigan, they unearthed a well-preserved skeleton 7 feet 2 inches in length, and is supposed to be that member of an early tribe of Indians. It was found nearly 30 feet underground. I'm Jenna Bosiger, and thank you so much for watching, liking, and subscribing to my Cryptid Cryptids YouTube channel. I really do appreciate it. And until next time, bye!